Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Campbell Price in a new format, streaming to you exclusively live on not one, but two platforms. Hopefully, this is actually working. On one platform, I'm on the YouTube, and hopefully, you can see that if you've tuned in live, and you can potentially ask me questions. It will also be available afterwards. And then, hello everyone, on Instagram, because Instagram's where all the kids are. Hi, Instagram. So this seems to be working. Fingers crossed. Yes, Matthew says success. So this is a known person who's actually responded. So that is excellent. Hi, Kim. Kim is calling me a techno guy. Thank you, Kim. Well, hello, everyone. It's nice to see you. I know I've not been around much in the summer, didn't do one last month, was hoping to do these every month. I had a technical issue last month, but here I am. But very special shift in the location of this live stream because I'm not coming to you from home. I'm not coming to you from the office. I'm coming to you from the Manchester Museum store because our Wi-Fi has been upgraded in lockdown. And so I can actually talk to you and refer to objects, which is very exciting. So we're hoping to continue this in future. So hello, I hope you're all safe. I hope you're all well. Thank you to everyone who sent in a question. I think on this format, I could see questions on Instagram. Not so sure about YouTube because I don't see any interface that would tell me where the questions are, but that's fine. Have lots of questions anyway. So I'm going to get right into it because I have a few already that have come in. So first question from Kelly. That was Kelly on Instagram. Hi, Kelly. Knowing Kelly knew that this month and next month, the museum is theming some of our curatorial programming on the theme of nature. Kelly asks, what, Campbell, is your favorite animal-related object in the collection? Now, this is quite the question. Now, I've not done this before, but I've got some objects out. Just get my non-surgical glove on. Hopefully you can see this, but there are two pieces which I love from a site called Serbet El Khadim in the Sinai Peninsula. A lot of activity going on there from the middle into the New Kingdoms. And so hopefully you can see this little guy. For the people on Instagram, for the people on YouTube. This is, I don't know if anyone can actually tell what it is. It is meant to be, actually, before I tell you what it is, it's some kind of creature. We have several of these in faience. So faience is this this fired glazed ceramic, often in very blue or green colors. The Egyptians were very fond of it, especially at the site of Serbet El Khadim, because that is where the goddess Hathor, lady of Mefkat, is worshipped. Mefkat is like turquoise. So it's a semi-precious stone, but also Mefkat could be approximated, the semi-precious stone could be approximated by the making of faience, which, as hopefully you can see, the clay is baked inside, but it's not the same greeny, bluey color all the way through. So at the site of Serbet al Khadim, there was a temple to the goddess Hathor, great party goddess, often shown in the form of a cow. But Hathor also was the kind of patroness goddess of mining expeditions there. So she had a significant number of gifts given to her at the site of Serbet al Khadim. And Manchester Museum, like several museums who participated in Finds Division, which I'll come back to, a separate question about that, we received a proportion of these finds. So this little creature is one of these items, these votive offerings, gifts for the gods, left at the sacred precinct surrounding temple of the goddess Hathor at Serbet al Khadim. Now, if you weren't sure what that creature was, Look at this little chap. Can you see that? This is one of my absolute favourites. There is another version of this from the same site at the wonderful Bolton Museum and Art Gallery just down the road here in Greater Manchester. This is undoubtedly a little cat. And it's a nice kind of point about the way the ancient Egyptians represented divinity, because you can represent, deities as jackals, as scarabs, as ibis birds, as cats, as dogs, as crocodiles. But there are a certain range of goddesses, divine felines, who could be playful cats, mother cats, or they could be fearsome lionesses. So in some ways, although we think of Hathor as a goddess associated with cows and the bovine imagery of Hathor, in fact, she might also be associated with the cat at the site of Serebit El Karim. And I just think that little face, the kind of the fur indicated on it, from a little tile, again, a votive tile. This was not used to decorate the temple necessarily. That wasn't its primary function. It was left as a gift for the gods, because if the gods were on your side, if you propitiated, one of my favorite words, the gods with gifts, then hopefully they would look kindly on you. So that is my current favorite animal. Thank you, Kelly, for the question. Current favorite animal in the collection. You can't see her behind me, but behind me in the storeroom, I can't really move with this setup. There is a representation of the goddess Sekhmet, the goddess most associated with the most fearsome element of lions, the lioness goddess who, in mythological texts, drinks human blood. And she is celebrated and memorialized and actualized in some fundamental way on a series of over 1,000 granodiorite statues. We have the head of one of them here. Kim says she's learned a new word. Is that propitiate? It's one of my favorites. So thank you for the question, Kelly. That's a really good one. Also on the theme of nature, I don't know how widely I advertised that this would be sort of the semi-official theme this week. Bob, I don't know Bob's last name, on Instagram as well, asks, Campbell, what is the significance of the snake in ancient Egypt? What is the significance of the snake? Well, Bob, here we have a gorgeous example of the snake people tend to think of when they think of ancient Egypt, and that is a uraeus, which is one of these hoity-toity Egyptological terms, which basically just means a rearing cobra. This is a nice example because it comes from the site of Hawara, a site about which I've spoken a lot in the past history of these broadcasts, because we have a lot of material in Manchester from Hawara. It forms the core of our exhibition, Golden Mummies of Egypt, and I reflect a lot on the aspects of Hawara, religious, topographical, historical, colonial, in my recent book, Golden Mummies of Egypt, Interpreting Identities from Greco-Roman Egypt. So Manchester has material from the Middle Kingdom from the site, but I can be fairly sure, based on the style and the treatment and the fact it's got gold leaf on it, that this is from the Greco-Roman period, from the Ptolemaic period in Egyptian history, last few centuries BCE, when Egypt was ruled by Macedonian kings called Ptolemy, ending with, of course, Cleopatra VII, 30 BCE, and then Egypt becomes part of the Roman Empire, and Hawara remains a very important cemetery site. And this is what I think, thanks for the kind words on the books, highly recommended, available to buy exclusively through the Manchester Museum shop. Google Manchester Museum shop. Can't get it on Amazon. But this is a piece not illustrated in the book. It's not in the exhibition, but this piece is made of wood, and it's absolutely classically Egyptian in the sense that it's not just a snake, but the snake has a solar disc on the top of it. So the solar disc is a sign that, of course, whatever you're looking at is somehow associated with, linked to the sun god. And so there's this idea in religious literature that the pharaoh wears a cobra on his brow, a rearing cobra that spits fire and poison at the pharaoh's enemies. And then in the book of what is in the underworld, there are serpents that spit fire, and these are pretty scary things. But you can co-opt, you can command, you can channel, you can divert the power of this divine serpent that represents a kind of emanation and extension of the sun god's power. You can put it on regular objects, whether that's a king's, well, not just regular objects, powerful, effective objects, like the king's crown, king's kind of diadem, or here, this is not from a royal diadem. Hopefully you can see it has a little tang. There's a little wooden tang to insert it into a space, and it has, hopefully you can see, a hole through the back of the sun disk. This is because this was probably part of a frieze of these gilded wooden, beautifully painted with the blue and the red pigment. Again, that very Egyptian, pharaonic Egyptian color palette. This was probably, and we have better preserved examples in museums in different places, this was part of a frieze, a divine frieze associated with cult objects and things we would call shrines in Egyptology. The place a god dwells is a shrine. The place a god's statue is located is a shrine. But also the place you put a dead body that has been transformed by the ritual of mummification into a god. And this, again, is what the Golden Mummies of Egypt exhibition, to an extent, and certainly what the accompanying book is about, is trying to challenge our Western assumptions about the dead in ancient Egypt, for whom the ancient Egyptians were very happy to say in text and in image and in material objects that these really were dead people that had been turned into gods after death. And a sure way of deifying, divinizing the deceased was to apply gold leaf to a mask, to a coffin cover, to a cartonnage, even in the Roman and Ptolemaic period, to the flesh itself. But just looking at this rearing cobra, it just looks like the triumph of divinity over death, because gods are forever. Gods are untarnishable beings. They rear up and they triumph over death. So this would be part of perhaps the side or the front or the top of a coffin, very fancy funerary outfit. As I say, it's found at the site of Hawara in the Fayum, very major Greco-Roman period cemetery there. And so, in a way, in answer to Bob's question, what do snakes signify? Well, they signify divine power, but they also signify, in this context, I think, that traditional pharaonic idea of the triumph of the divine over death. And so if you could afford it, that's exactly what you would have. Of course, this is the kind of thing which looks great in a museum case. What you don't get, and what, if it's on display, it would be good to suggest, is the whole frieze. So a whole collection of these. Only one of these came from the excavation at Hawara, led by Flinders Petrie, conducted by Egyptian workers in the field. Only one of these came to Manchester to suggest what was going on. So a really beautiful piece. You wouldn't want to meet one of these serpents on a dark night. You certainly wouldn't want to meet it in the afterlife either. So thank you for that question, Bob. Related to that, then, regular viewer Matthew, hello, asks, this is opening out into more general questions about Egyptology, which is what I'm here for. I'm glad Matthew asked this, because I'm surrounded by stuff from ancient Egypt. I don't know if you can see more of the stuff behind me. It's rather dark. You can't really see it on YouTube so well because I can't move the computer. But the thing about this question is that it's an important one, and I've touched on it before, but I've never been asked it explicitly. So Matthew asks, can you explain how the so-called division of finds works? So finds division, or the French term partage is often used. Finds division was the basic reason museums like Manchester have so many objects. These were not, for the most part, bought on the open market. They were given by the Egyptian government between the 1880s mainly and the 1950s, up to really the 1970s, although division tailed off, finds division tailed off in the 20th century. And the concept, the idea for fines division comes, it seems, from two archaeologists, the head of the Antiquities Service, which traditionally, under colonial rule, because remember, kids, Egypt was, of course, invaded by the British in 1882. It had a long history of European domination since the early 19th century. Of course, Napoleon goes in, invades Egypt in 1798, and the British come along again in 1801. So the British and the French basically tussle over Egypt. The Germans try and get a look in, the Americans try and get a look in, but it's the British and the French who are really making a claim for the kind of cultural, the patrimony of Egypt. And so it's understood that the British have this kind of free colonial control of Egypt, but the French, as a matter of esteem, retain control, because remember, the French see themselves, and the world sees them as originating Egyptology in the form of the translation of hieroglyphs through Jean-Francois Champollion. So Champollion is the one attributed to whom the decipherment of hieroglyphs can reasonably be made. Although it's not an overnight thing. Incidentally, next year, 2022, is the bicentenary of the decipherment of hieroglyphs, centenary of the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. More on that in future broadcasts. But in the 1880s, Britain ruling Egypt in this way, the French head of the Antiquities Service, which had always been a kind of a French reserved business, Gaston Maspero, cooks up a scheme with the British, the English Egyptologist, archaeologist, William Matthew Flinders Petrie, and they say between them, okay, the Egyptian government, the national collection in Cairo, the Egyptian Museum will retain 50%, at least 50% of finds made in archaeological excavation, the best 50, and then up to 50% of the rest of the finds will be distributed to archaeologists, not simply to archaeologists to pocket and do with what they like, on the understanding that these distributed finds will be sent to public institutions. That's at least what Flinders Petrie tries to make clear. He rages against this idea of subscribers to organizations like the Egypt Exploration Fund, now Society. This is not purchase money, Petrie says. This is a way of objects being loaned in some way or sent, well, at least in legal terms, it is transfer of ownership. Objects being held and owned by responsible parties. And for the most part, Petrie doesn't see that as private individuals. So finds division is this worldwide system that means that when you're digging at Hawara, you find 200 things, up to 100 of those can leave Egypt. And honestly, a lot of very good stuff left Egypt, and we benefited from it in Manchester Museum. And so it's our job to, of course, look after the material, try and communicate it and preserve it as best we can, but also to be honest about this history of, while it was legal transfer, it also, of course, is done under the colonial context. So finds division completely halts in the early 1980s when all Egyptian antiquities become property of the Egyptian state. Of course, after the major Egyptian revolution in the 1950s, Britain no longer had a political stake in Egyptian government, and so Egypt was ruled by an Egyptian government. But since the 1980s, all objects legally are the property of the Egyptian state. That is, of course, not to deny that a huge amount of material sadly leaves illegally still, and goes to places around the world, and we basically don't know where it is. But legally, you cannot export things from Egypt nowadays. So division of finds does not happen. So from the 1880s to about 1980, you have about a century of this finds distribution. And this is why Manchester Museum has, for the most part, most of its 18,000 objects from Egypt and Sudan. So thank you for asking that question, Matthew. It's an important one. Okay, gosh, the time is running away with us. Steve asks, long-term viewer Steve, I don't know if Steve is joining on Instagram, if he's on Instagram or if he's able to watch on YouTube. Hi, Steve, if you're watching. This is more of a flippant question. Do you think after lockdown you could pass the Pharaoh fitness test? And he spelt fitness with PH. Well, I think Steve is referring to the ancient Egyptian ritual of the Hebsed, the Royal Rejuvenation Festival, often called a Jubilee, probably slightly misleadingly by modern commentators, in which the pharaoh, at least in depictions of this ritual, which may or not actually have happened, in the depictions at least, we have a section of one of the depictions from the Third Intermediate period here in Manchester Museum. In that depiction, the pharaoh runs round some boundary markers, and so I think Steve's asking, after lockdown, could I do the run around the boundary markers? I'll be honest, Steve. I've tried to keep fit. When the pools have been open, I go for a swim, and I like a jog now and again. So hopefully, yes, I could run around the boundary markers in answer to your question. Thank you very much. And then finally, viewer Kim. Hi, I know Kim's watching on Instagram. Well done for connecting that way. Kim's question is very specific, but I have a very specific answer. Unfortunately, not backed up by an actual object. Wasn't able to put my hands on the object in question. Kim asks, has any gold jewelry in the collection been tested with a spectrometer to find out the gold's purity? Oh, now, sorry, the sounds of building work going on in the background. We're having an extension built. It's almost complete, but the work is still going on. So apologies about that. So Kim, about the purity of gold. Actually, yes, we have had the gold jewelry, some of it tested, especially very important material from a Middle Kingdom burial, Tomb 124 at the site of Rika, just south of the Fayum. Beautiful object called the Rika pectoral. If you Google Rika pectoral, RIQQA, you'll find pictures of it. It's a gorgeous piece of cloisonné inlaid with semi-precious stones gold jewelry. A few years ago, that was analysed under scanning electron microscopes, and studies and analysis was done about the purity of the gold and about the nature of the construction of the jewelry and the composition of the piece. And funny you should ask him, it is a stunning piece. A couple of interesting points worth saying. All of this will incidentally be published shortly by some colleagues. I just got the proofs of the article last week actually to look at. So the technique for the creating of the jewelry seems consistent, although it's difficult to measure for sure, with techniques that are otherwise known outside Egypt. So possibly the gold workers were coming into Egypt from the Near East, from the area of Israel, Syria, Palestine, into Egypt, which is intriguing. But the gold composition, although it looks very golden, it's maybe not quite as buttery a gold as my wedding ring, which is, your bulk standard 18 karat stuff. It's less buttery gold than that, but that may be because in the analysis, it was shown to be an alloy which we often call in Egyptology electrum. Although it looks like gold, electrum is a naturally occurring alloy, often mixture of silver and gold. And so in the analysis, the gold used for the recapectoral was between, and I'm quoting, 27 and 49% silver. So quite a lot of silver in it. And it had apparently just less than 3% copper in it. So it just goes to show that the gold is not very pure in that instance, but still you can make absolutely beautiful, beautiful things from it. And it's worth saying, just to go back to a beautiful ancient piece with gold leaf. Often this Greco-Roman gold leaf has a reddish tinge to it. And that red gold may have a solar significance. You can't be sure, but it's worth saying what we would consider importance in terms of gold purity and the purity of the metal doesn't seem to have applied so much in ancient times. Gold affected divinity. It didn't simply symbolize divinity, an important distinction. So I think my husband has actually just joined. Hi, gold wedding ring, probably purer than the ancient Egyptian gold. So the significance of this as a gold covering, as I've said before, is to effect and ensure and promote divinity. It doesn't matter that it is particularly pure. But a point to close on, a point actually made to me by the former Curator of Egyptology here in Manchester, Professor Rosalie David, OBE, is that just think about, the gold we wear today in jewellery. Where has the gold come from? Certainly if you're buying gold jewellery, say in Egypt, maybe what you're buying has been melted down from ancient sources. And who knows, you could be, I don't know, wearing what was once, I don't know, the mask of Nefertiti, the coffin of Ramses the Great, the bracelet of King Khufu. Who knows? These kind of things are very likely to have been in circulation because most royal tombs were robbed, and the gold, as we know from the royal caches, was stripped off and melted down and used for something more useful than a coffin to the minds of most people living in Egypt at the time. So with that, I think this has been a success. It's been a trial run, but I hope to do it again next month, last Thursday of the month at 2:00. I'll be taking questions on nature. So yeah, just tune in again. Hopefully, maybe it can get uploaded to other platforms as well. So if you weren't watching live, you can find this on the From Home website, which is part of the museum's website in general. So I'll say thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for tuning in, and see you all next time.